most of them have probably never stepped foot in an engineering company, never mind an SME based in Leighton Buzzard. We need to get that message across that the government needs to start listening to somebody who knows this industry, knows what we do, what we need.
Hi everyone, welcome to the next edition of our podcast series, and I'm delighted to be joined by Andrea Wilson today, who's had an illustrious career in the world of manufacturing, and I've got a lot of questions for Andrea.
People say to me, you've not really achieved anything yet, you've still not got your champion, you've not got your Minister for Manufacturing, what's changed? So the one thing that has changed is we now have a whole variety of people speaking about a champion for manufacturing or a minister for manufacturing.
Andrea is also a well-known commentator on the world of manufacturing in the UK and a huge advocate for SMEs in manufacturing in the UK, and I really want to dig into that today with her.
We have some of the best, most innovative people in this country, and they don't have the environment in order to maximise the potential of what they've come up with. So what are they doing? They're taking it abroad to manufacture because they don't have the incentives to do it here in the UK.
Andrea, welcome. Before we start, you just want to give us a bit of a background on your own business, your own company, just to get an outline, and then I want to talk about a few things in particular.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. I'm director of Hone All Precision. We're a fantastic SME engineering subcontract service provider based in Leighton Buzzard, and we specialise in deep hole drilling, deep hole boring, honing, and CNC turning. So, in simple terms, we make tubes, lots of fantastic tubes.
Fantastic. So all of that just went right over my head, but I'm going to hopefully pick it up with you along the way. If you're okay, Andrea, I want to start at a slightly different place because it's the obvious question, but you've had a career that's been over 30 years in manufacturing, and I really want to focus in on the issue of women in manufacturing and women in engineering, if I can start there. I know it's slightly edgy to start, but I'd love to know more about your experience, because if you go back 30 years when you first got into manufacturing, it was less common than it is today, and it's still not common enough. And you've made it through to run your own business successfully. And I'd like to hear a bit more about that story, particularly from your perspective as a woman in a very male-dominated industry.
I personally love being female in a male-dominated industry. I think it's a great asset. I think women think very differently to men, and that brings definite strengths, particularly to an engineering and manufacturing environment. 30 years ago, yes, it was a lot different to how it is now. It was astounding for it to be considered, okay that I was technical and people could speak to me on an exhibition stand. They just thought I was there to sort of, make the place look pretty. But thankfully, that's changed a lot, particularly, the last 15 years. In the very early days, there was never a queue at the ladies at any engineering or manufacturing event. There's a lot more these days. But I think that the issue is deeper. It's not that we can't attract enough women into manufacturing. We're simply not attracting enough talent into engineering and manufacturing right now. And the problem is the fact that the perceptions and the ideas of what engineering and manufacturing looks like now is so outdated. And we're not doing enough to change that, either as an industry or as a country, and certainly not from our government either.
Yeah, it's interesting because manufacturing, from my perspective, should be a celebrated part of the economy. I mean, it produces goods that all of us experience every single day of our life as consumers. Why do you think that's been the case? Why do you think people have kind of started stepping over manufacturing when it's so fundamental to GDP, to the health of the UK economy, to workforce and job creation? What else? What is distracting them?
I think the government just completely forgot that we are the backbone of British industry, and SMEs are the lifeblood of this economy. 90% of engineering and manufacturing businesses are SMEs, if not more. And we became such a service industry, when the banking system flourished and, the city all became very sort of popular in the 80s and 90s. Everybody seemed to forget about who it is that's actually making all the goods and who it is that's generating the wealth.
And is that across all industry sectors, do you think? Or is it big manufacturing, you've got an easy ride at the political table and it's the SMEs that are fighting for their place?
I think it really depends on the industry and the environment at the time in the country, the political environment. Certainly, defence comes to the forefront as and when there are political instabilities in the world. Aerospace, during COVID, etc., it dropped away. But I do think, yes, the large OEMs do have a much more direct route into government and into policy setting. And it's one of the reasons that we actually see that the majority of supposed support systems for our industry in particular, and particularly SMEs, are really just so inappropriate and not applicable to the businesses we are, because they're set by people who are not running 5, 10, 20, 40, 50 strong businesses. They're set by people who are employing multiples of thousands in multiple of sites and countries.
And it's interesting you say that, because obviously I've watched a lot of the commentary you make around manufacturing online, and I know that one of the things you're an advocate for is that the manufacturing industry has representation at the political table. Maybe you could talk a bit more about that and why that is so important.
I think it's based on the last 25 years of me sitting on various advisory boards, on various panels. I sat on the EDA development plan, the National Skills Academy for Manufacturing, the Automotive Academy, SEMTA, you name it, I've tried. And we're still having the same conversations 25, 30 years later. We still have a major skills gap. We still have outdated perceptions of the industry. And we keep engaging with these politicians that come in, and we show them around our factories and we get them on board and we sell what a brilliant industry we are. And then 3 months later, they're suddenly in charge of housing. Or 3 months later, they're not there at all. So having somebody that is apolitical, somebody that basically is our champion, an experienced, passionate professional who loves the industry, who knows what we do and the problems that we face, who can bring together all the things that Labour are now saying they're going to offer us through an industrial strategy, the Industrial Strategy Advisory Council. All of these things need an SME point of view and an SME feedback, and they need somebody to bring it all together. Otherwise, we're just going to end up with a whole lot of disparate policies and quangos that just do exactly the same as we've seen this last 25 years, talk a lot and deliver not a lot.
And without sort of getting into this sort of political frame, I mean, it's unavoidable to some extent, but do you perceive there's going to be a big difference between the previous government and the current government? And I'm also interested in, I would have thought a Labor government, pro-union, pro-worker, would have had a much more positive impact. But then there's been things like the increase in national insurance, for example, which seems like a bit of a backhanded way to help.
Yeah, I think prior to Labour actually winning the election, we all thought there was going to be a distinct change and major positive moves, particularly in the focus for engineering and manufacturing. I think everybody, including all the trade and membership organisations and including the Big Five, they were all shocked by the NIC rises because Labour, I don't think, had consulted with them on any of it. And if they had, they're not saying so.
Yeah.
So I think that came as a real big shock and a huge slap in the face to the supporters of Labour, who thought that their focus would actually encourage business and encourage entrepreneurship, and their commitment to growth is about for us to all grow our businesses. The majority of us are unfortunately still labour intensive. Growing our business means recruiting more people. Recruiting more people is impossible when you keep hiking up NICs and not having anything in the background to offset those extra costs.
Is there anything coming down the pipe that you know of that's going to make that a bit more acceptable as a scenario, or is it just the thin edge of the wedge?
I'm certainly not seeing or hearing anything right now, particularly in relation to SMEs and being heard. There's a couple of things that have been interesting this week. Innovate UK have just announced that they are revisiting their smart grants and awards because they want to actually focus on what SMEs are looking at and what they need, because I think they've realised and they've had the feedback that they're not actually delivering what needs to happen. We need every other government policy and support mechanism to go through the same review process, but that admits that what is currently there isn't right and isn't working. And that takes a lot for civil servants to admit.
Yeah, it's a tough call when people aren't that familiar with the environment either. to sort of convince them, because they're just doing it. It's a paper exercise on a spreadsheet, rather than the practicalities. How big an influence are or should be things like apprenticeships and training? Because they get a lot of publicity. There's been a lot of investment. There's funds around, but, they're teaching 4-year-olds to code computers. How does the education system, including apprenticeships, play a bigger part, and are the government behind that?
I can't say they're behind that. I think they realise that the current system doesn't work. The apprenticeship levy hasn't worked. Apprenticeships have dropped since the apprenticeship levy was brought in, and it was brought in to actually expand and enhance apprenticeships. That is certainly not working. Our current higher education, colleges, etc., they can't provide the training we need because they don't have the equipment or the funds for it, because they get paid exactly the same to deliver a care course as they do an engineering course. A care course requires a lot less investment by the college. Also, let's just make the point, a T-level in care requires more on-site hours in the workplace than an engineering one does. How does that work? Again, these things are just further evidence that common sense has not been applied when we're trying to actually create policy that's going to promote growth and enhance this industry.
And do you think there's any sort of subplot where, the government, this week they've announced policies around AI and technology. Do you think there's some sort of subplot going on here that they're trying to drive everybody into the world of robotics and automation rather than humans?
No, I think that's headline grabbing just to offset the fact that so many people are actually the most pessimistic they've been about business conditions for the last X number of years. I think the last report that I saw was this is the worst that business confidence has been since before COVID. And I think, what do you need to do when that happens, when your policies are obviously not ticking the box that we're supposed to tick, and confidence is falling in your government? What happens? You come up with some nice new announcement.
Yeah. I mean, there's obviously a reality about automation and robotics at some point in the future. And I just wondered if the government, was perhaps sort of trying to drive things that way, But then again, robots don't pay tax. Not yet anyway.
I think they are, because they do understand that, at the end of the day, this is the way that the future is going. However, like everything else, they don't have the joined up thinking behind this policy. I was on a call yesterday with the Industrial Strategy Skills Commission with Make UK and their advisory sort of panel and offering feedback. And there was a lady on there that's very heavily into robotics, but says there is not a college course that can be funded that gives them a full qualification in robotics and automation. So it's all well and good saying this is the way we're going to be, but you have to make sure the infrastructure and the system is there to support it. And currently it's not.
Yeah, I actually had a look at the apprenticeship programs recently about this because I was suspicious of the same fact. And when I spoke to Fahim Khan from Make, who's one of their senior economists, it prompted me to go and look. And it seems ridiculous to me that everything's so out of step with where it needs to be to move things forward.
Yeah, we need to get back to basics, start at the beginning. as Julie Andrews says, it's a very good place to start. And people keep trying to jump in, 70%, 80% down the line and thinking that they can offer a quick fix. But like any house that you build, unless the foundations are solid, it's going to crumble.
And how do people like you get through to government? Like, do you go and camp on their doorstep or just keep writing emails, or how do you do that? Because obviously you make common sense to me. Why aren't they listening to you?
Probably because I don't necessarily put things in the correct language that they'd like to hear it in. And they want to hear from people who say what they need to hear. And yes, okay, occasionally say, well, this is also needed, but certainly not somebody who's going to criticise what they're doing. And that's why all we can do is hope and ask that our trade bodies and membership associations stand up for us, because you need that greater voice, you need that wider voice. My Thursday LinkedIn post for this campaign for a champion, the key phrase on that is one strong voice, one clear message. Because for years, we've had so many different trade associations, membership bodies, affiliations, councils. Everybody's shouting for their own piece of the pie. but nobody's actually joining all these voices together and saying what is there is fundamentally not working. We need to get back to basics. We need to relook at the support mechanisms. Rishi Sunak said to Stephen Phipson once, why should I put any more support into UK manufacturing in terms of, improvement schemes, that sort of thing? Because they don't take up what we've already got. The problem is the delivery mechanisms for that support are not speaking to enough businesses. So companies don't know what's about. If they do know what it's about, the application process is so complex and convoluted that it puts them off. Or like most SME owner-managed businesses, you don't have time to fill in a 25-page application form to hopefully get 20 grand, which you then find at the end. In order to get your 20 grand towards your capital equipment, you have to show that you've employed 2 more people. Well, if you wanted to employ 2 more people, you could, but you probably are trying not to. You're buying the kit to reduce headcount, not increase it.
It just seems like complete madness to me. I mean, and there's also the existential threats to UK manufacturing as well, like imports and manufacture elsewhere, and in fact, even the labour migrating outside, or the skills not being here. I mean, how much of an impact on UK manufacturing do imports and cheaper commodities have?
The problem is we are a society who basically go for the quick fix, and in most cases people have to look for the cheapest option, particularly during the cost of living crisis. Where the problem starts is that we aren't, as a country and as a government, promoting UK supplied and manufactured goods. And there are not incentives to make sure that those goods are UK supplied and manufactured. I was told, even the medals for our OBE CBEs, the government's gone abroad to buy them. Now, how ridiculous is that? These are English awards, UK awards that have been given to people for the highest contributions to our society. And yet they're being given medals that have been manufactured outside the UK. Yeah,
and I would like to think that the person who made that decision probably got fired. But clearly, it's like that. I mean, there's things I get when you do that. I mean, and I don't want to take this conversation, by the way, to a level where it's too controversial. But obviously, a guy like Donald Trump is now advocating, we're going to bring industry back to the US. Does that have an impact on UK manufacturing, or should we be doing the same thing, saying let's protect our own before we start looking after everybody else?
Yeah, we need a level of protectionism, but you've also got to understand and make sure that we're working in collaboration with our international partners. There are some countries that are better at things than we are, and there are things that we're better at than they are. But what I do find, particularly as I've seen with a couple of the contacts who are part of my sort of little campaign on a Thursday, America, even prior to Trump, have basically set up manufacturing champions within each state. And they are promoting the industry, they're promoting events, they're bringing businesses together, almost like the German Mittelstand, And that's, again, where we're missing out completely, because there's such brilliant best practice out there where you can see how governments have promoted and brought manufacturing back to life. And yet we're not even looking at what they're doing well and how we can apply it here.
And again, this is a rabbit hole in terms of, the passion for change. But are there other Andreas out there? Are you a lone voice, or are you part of the groundswell of people that are out there trying to change the narrative here?
No, there are a lot of people trying to change the narrative. People desperately trying to change the skills landscape. Ingenuity are doing a fantastic job. Anne Watson has really transformed what Ingenuity are doing. And we need to see more of that. And thankfully, she's got a voice on this new Skills England board, etc. There's a lot of people who are promoting UK manufacturing, like Mark Weymouth and Stuart Whitehead and Matt Chilton, who every week are posting about all the positive investments. Of course, we don't see this in the mainstream media. So it's on LinkedIn, it's on websites and emails, but we need this in the mainstream media. There's a whole host of people fighting, like Confederation of British Metal Forming, fighting for SMEs in particular and their members. So there's a lot of people that are trying to come together now. And funnily enough, I do think the one thing that people say to me, you've not really achieved anything yet. You've still not got your champion. You've not got your Minister for Manufacturing. What's changed? So the one thing that has changed is we now have a whole variety of people speaking about a champion for manufacturing or a minister for manufacturing. So we have different trade associations, we have different membership organisations and bodies who are actually all asking for the same thing. Some of the words, some of the terminology is slightly different, but they're all asking for the same thing. So it's this one strong voice, one clear message. We need to get that message across that the government needs to start listening to somebody who knows this industry, knows what we do, what we need, and not just the civil servants who, with respect, most of them have probably never stepped foot in an engineering company, never mind an SME based in Leighton Buzzard with, 40 people in the workshop.
Well, it definitely should.
I know.
Maybe we'll post this to them at the end and they can and take a look. Are there, just on a more micro level, apart from national insurance, which is almost a tax on employment or on hiring and growing, are there other things that have changed in your career? Because there's been a lot of regulation change around employment and around industry, notwithstanding the fact that things like Brexit. But what have been the major impacts on your business, and what's really currently in the frame of things that are impacting you as a business owner and someone who's, passionate about their industry?
I'd say the biggest thing that's impacting us right now is business confidence. We have 4,000 customers over every industry, and a lot of them are still saying the order's coming, just not right. It's just not here yet. They're waiting, and I'm not sure what they're waiting for now. So business confidence and future demand is probably first and foremost. A lack of skills, being able to get qualified, technically skilled labour is a major issue. Thankfully, we have a really, really good retention rate because a lot of the new employment changes don't bother good employers like ourselves because we already do things right. We already treat people well. We already have a lot of these sort of, we did the bare minimum and then some long before we were told to do just the bare minimum. And I think, for a lot of businesses, this NIC hike, it's really going to hit the pockets, and it could send some of them over the edge because there's not been that planning and that forethought as to the impact this is going to have and how quickly to allow people to adapt. So, Labour said, we're not going to tax the working man or working person. But they have in a roundabout way. They're just making the employer look responsible for it because companies of, our sort of size, we're either going to have to delay pay rises or not pay them at all because we have to cover that increase somewhere. There's only so much in the budget. Customers are not immediately going to go, yeah, you can put your prices up 10%. There you go. We understand. Of course they're not, because that just drives UK competitiveness even lower. So what Labour have done is very clever. Yeah, we're not going to take it out of the working person's pocket, but guess what? We'll take it out of your employer's pocket that have to take it from your pocket and they'll get the blame, not us.
Yeah, 100%. Because, talking to companies that I interface with, they're deferring hiring or are saying, look, at the moment, we're going to try and do more with less because simply the cost of an individual hire, if you've got 100 employees, it's £100,000 or thereabouts a year more for doing the same. And, with inflation and other things going on and uncertainty and global issues, they're not prepared to put their prices up and their clients are not prepared to pay.
Yeah.
So it's a no-win situation for everybody.
Yeah. But, we've faced these battles before, we've faced these barriers before. And as we always do, we knuckle on down and we try and make the best of what we've got with what we have left. Because as an industry, we're brilliant, we're resilient, we're responsive. It's just time that government started to actually realise that and appreciate it and stop. A bit like they used to say, stop whipping the good child.
Yeah, it's interesting because I also speak to people that are in investment banking and professional services and, and it's no slight on them, but they have a whole different perspective. So, you're dealing with a real world problem in terms of labour intensive, producing a good, raw materials, skill shortages. But there's not a skill shortage in some of the professional services, financial services, those types of areas who, this is just a ripple for them. They have a whole different perspective.
But they'll soon have a different perspective if UK manufacturing falls and fails, because look at what happened during COVID.
Right.
who supplied the ventilators? It wasn't the bankers, it wasn't the financial services, it was SMEs who basically put everything else to one side. They changed their operations massively. They basically had people learning whole new skill sets in order to be able to supply these ventilators that saved tens of thousands of lives. These investment bankers, etc., when the next nightmare happens, maybe they'll think, maybe we should have saved our UK manufacturing industry, because then, we wouldn't lose all these people.
Yeah. People forget too quickly though, don't they?
Yeah.
Hence, post-COVID, that's not that long ago, but it feels like a million years ago.
Yeah, but it's not, It's 5 years since really it all started to hit the fan.
Yeah.
And during that time, what we saw was amazing. This industry came together, collaboration over competition, because all that mattered was what this country needed, Yep. Now all we're asking for a little bit of recognition in return, and where is it?
Yeah, it just seems unjust as well as sort of self-harming in a way, economically and other ways. Do you see the day where the UK becomes uber specialised in its manufacturing sector and maybe just abandons some areas where either others do it better and cheaper, or do you think we're a good solid all-rounder?
We can be a good solid all-rounder, and something needs to change quickly to make sure that still happens. But all I'm saying at the moment, a lot of the people I speak to at various events and through my LinkedIn work and visits is we have some of the best, most innovative people in this country, great inventors, great innovators, and they can't find or they don't have the environment in order to maximise the potential of what they've come up with. So what are they doing? They're taking it abroad to manufacture, because they don't have the environment or the incentives to do it here in the UK. That means then that technical knowledge, that expertise, that innovation, it all goes abroad, because of course what happens then? The development of that product continues abroad. So we've got to create this environment for entrepreneurs, and we've got to allow innovators to flourish here, even if it costs us a little in the short term. When I first buy a machine, I don't expect an immediate return on that machine. I invest in that machine for it to give me a return over a period of time.
Yep.
That's what the government needs to start doing with this industry.
Are there any role model economies or countries that the UK should look to and say they've really got it right?
I would have said German economy at the minute, and German manufacturing's not having a great time. But I do think in terms of their SME community and the support that they give to SME manufacturing, bearing in mind, again, even in Germany, it's a really high percentage of manufacturing as a whole. They do have that right. Again, it's all about collaboration. It's about connecting people, I know what the government are trying to do with their combined authorities. They're trying to connect these areas. But, for us in Bedfordshire, they basically destroyed and let them let go, and didn't leave us with a combined authority because they'd not had time to sort any of that yet. So therefore we have 6 different councils and councillors stroke mayors all fighting for what they want to achieve for their little bit. There's no holistic approach to it. We're right smack bang in this new Oxford-Cambridge arc, that's going to be the shining light for the country. But, we've got this 6 massive sort of arguing bodies who can't agree on what's best. So how on earth is this going to work? I just don't get it.
If I had the relevant politician also on this call, what would they say? Would they say she's right, or would they say she's completely misread this? We've got a brilliant strategy.
I think they'd say that the majority of what I'm talking about at this moment is down to the previous government, and they're just having to deal with the fallout. And I think they will say that their industrial strategy and their industrial strategy advisory council are going to be our saviour and are going to deliver on all the points that I'm making. Read the industrial strategy. The word SME, I think, is featured 4 times. It's not gonna be my saviour. Look at the Industrial Strategy Advisory Council. There's nobody on there from an SME engineering business. Who's going to speak on my behalf?
Yeah.
Who's going to speak on my 40 employees' behalf?
I don't want to say it's crazy because I'm sure they're very clever people, but ultimately, it makes no sense. Can I talk about skills for a moment? Because obviously that's the sort of business that I'm primarily involved in. But I'd like, you talk about a skill shortage, and I don't really want to reopen the Brexit discussion, and I know that hasn't necessarily affected your own business, but we talked a bit about apprentices, but in the short term, there is labour available elsewhere. Is that something that was Brexit a help or hindrance overall? And how do we get enough people into manufacturing quick enough domestically?
Brexit was a problem in the fact that, particularly for our business, we lost a couple of Polish guys who went back to their family because it was just too difficult, which, that did hurt. Particularly because we have a really good retention rate here. The majority of my staff have been here for 10, 20, 30, 35 years. And when you've had people that know that business and they work your way, to lose them over something you have no control over is really frustrating. How we get skills domestically into our businesses quickly, in my opinion, there's only one route, and that's the government to bring in a training and development tax credit, which is basically here when we're looking for new people who are coming into areas that are not as skilled as some of the other areas. We put Facebook community adverts out saying, do you have an attitude and aptitude for engineering? Do you have a passion for it? Are you interested? Do you want a chance? And we train them internally. Problem we have is we get nothing to help us with that. There's no incentive. And yet my local college got 5 million to build a lovely engineering centre in Leighton Buzzard and still has no engineering in it. Imagine what the businesses around Leighton Buzzard could have done with that 5 million as a training and tax development credit. So working a bit like an R&D tax credit where it's only offset against profits. You are allowed a particular percentage of wages, tooling, materials lost, etc., time for your engineers to train. You could have a smaller percentage for very unique and bespoke skills, higher percentage for skills that are transferable to other businesses. And the college tutors that currently don't have students or they're not qualified enough to teach the actual engineering skills that the students are needing could come in and sign it off like we used to with MVQ level 2s and 3s.
Yeah, and there's obviously a longer term view to that too, generationally, that, getting into schools and, getting more vocational skills through a longer run view of how they solve labour issues, I guess. Because that we tackled when I was at school and it doesn't happen now.
Yeah, it's got to be tackled so much more earlier than certainly secondary school even. I was a STEM ambassador for a while. I've just stopped at the moment because, to be honest, I don't have time to go into schools and basically go in front of students who didn't necessarily want to be there in the first place. Everywhere around me are STEM posters on the wall, and the first question I ask is, what does STEM stand for? And the students go, huh?
It's the number one kind of headline area. I wonder if manufacturing, although it's within that frame, they are really referring more to science and technology rather than engineering, for example.
But again, my first question is, what does STEM? What do they stand for?
Yeah.
And most of the students can't answer me because the posters are there to basically tick a box and to get their funding. And, primary engineer run by Susan Scurlock is an amazing idea. Going into primary schools with kits and teaching kids how to make things. There's another one, Imagineer, chap called Bob who runs that. You've then got brilliant sort of resources everywhere. Design and Technology Association that are feeding it into schools. But the teachers don't understand that this is a career that is worth having because there's no education piece done. And the careers teachers, I think you're lucky if you've got sort of one to a region now.
Yeah.
The whole landscape needs to change. And particularly now, universities are becoming even more expensive to attend. People are starting to realise that the debt they're coming out with is a major issue.
Yeah.
So we've got to push that there are other alternatives. And one of the things I do enjoy doing with the students that I sometimes meet, I ask them what they enjoy doing. So who enjoys maths? Me. Okay, guess what? You could be an accountant in engineering and manufacturing and earn 100 grand. You know, who likes checking the teacher's work when the teacher's writing on the board at school and they get it wrong? Who picks up that error? Me. Contract review. You can earn 50 to 60k a year doing that within engineering and manufacturing. Who likes shopping? Me. You know, guess what? You could spend other people's money for a job and earn 50k a year doing it. You know,
Yep.
and all of a sudden, their eyes are up. £1,000 a week? Really?
Yeah,
You know?
there's no. What about the other end of the scale? Because obviously, UK manufacturing's facing into a lot of retirements.
Yep.
You know, there's kind of both ends of it. You're getting it in the neck, aren't you? You're getting it with lack of skills coming in,
Yep.
and you're going to be losing a lot of talent over the
Yep.
next 5 to 10 years. Is there any conversation about that?
Well, yeah, this is again where this training and development tax credit could really transform the landscape, because people who are looking to retire are much more willing to train others than
Yeah.
those who are in the middle range years of their career. Because, of course, you know, it doesn't matter how good you are. If you're in your middle range years, you're worried that somebody else coming in can do your job or do it better. So you're a little bit protectionist about your own skills. And we see that a lot in engineering workshops. But, you know, when you've got somebody who knows they've got 3 to 5 years, they want to share that information. They want to share that knowledge. You know, and a training and development tax credit would give you and enable that. And particularly, you know, when people are wanting to go down to 2-3 days a week to enter into their retirement, they could be your training. You've got your own on-site lecturer.
Yeah, it'd be amazing. You know, particularly practically, you know, if manufacturers, you know, had kids come in and, you know, I'm not sure you can have a play on stuff, but, you know, actually get their hands on things, it might sway a few heads, get a few more people in.
Yeah, well, I heard about a great idea, and I can't remember who it was now, but, you know, somebody said we ought to use some of this sort of grant money to put a few engineering machines in a high street shop so that people walking past all things been made on machinery, you know, turned, milled, you know, things that people could actually take away maybe. So speaker stands, you know, the stuff that sort of separates your skybox from the DVD player or whatever, you know, little risers, or spinning tops, or, you know, what was that fidget spinner thing, you know, so that people actually saw what the engineering manufacturing process looks like. You know, my latest sort of series of Honal posts are about engineering's all around us. You just have to open your eyes and your imagination to see it. Because, you know, you look, the screens that we're speaking on, they were designed, they were manufactured, you know, design, prototype, manufactured. You know, the headphones, the watch, the glass, every single thing. We can't operate and function without something that was designed, prototyped, manufactured, sold, delivered, unwrapped, used.
Yeah. And all of us get exposure to that. I mean, and I know you don't like talking about yourself, but I just wanted to talk about you for a second, if that's okay, or you and your business.
Okay.
Because I think it'd be a missed opportunity not to, because one of the things that struck me when we first met and had a conversation was your business is unique in some ways, and that you've got this massively long tenure and loyalty among staff. You seem to have done something very right or very different. You know, if you could bottle a secret sauce that is your company, I mean, what's in that recipe that made you what you are?
I think there's sort of two parts to it. One of which is, in the first few years, I tried to become who I wasn't, because people kept telling me that being female, being too nice, being too soft, blah, 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 was a weakness. Being too emotional was a weakness. I did a little bit of coaching because I had a speech to do, and we spoke about a couple of other things at the time. This is probably 26 years ago, 25 years ago now. And she said, your biggest strength is to be you. She said, you know, because whenever you're being disingenuous, you don't, you know, your behaviour doesn't flow naturally. And I think the biggest thing, and the thing that I would say has changed here or has helped here, is understanding that everybody has needs. Everybody needs to be listened to. You can't always provide a solution for everybody, but you can try and find a way or a solution that will please the majority of people. You know, trying to keep people happy, understanding that they are going to go through family pressures. They are going to go through alcohol addiction, it really every range. Because if you don't accept that people are human and that people are going to have different pressures at different times, then you're never going to be able to work with people through the tough times. Working with them through the tough times allows you to then benefit when they're having the good times. And, my production manager, when he started with us 2 years ago, I said, do you do me 2 things? He was like, I'm terrified. I've never done this role before. I said, it won't let you fail because you need to do 2 things. And he's like, what's that? I said, keep my team happy and keep my customers happy. If we do those 2 things, then basically we end up making money because the processes are in place. And as long as people want to work with those processes, then basically everything else works together. Now, don't get me wrong, we're not perfect, but I think that's the other strength. When we try something new and it fails, we just go, okay, we tried, we failed, we'll try again.
That's interesting. That was the question I was going to ask you. You look like, you strike me as someone who's got it all under control. Do you ever, is that just a great face on it, or do you ever feel out of control?
Oh, God, yeah. Nobody who runs a small business feels that they've always got it under control. Nobody. There's days that I go home and all I want to do is pull the quilt over my head and not come out until the next morning. But you've got to come out the next morning and go back to work. The times when we bought our factory that we were in just before the banking crisis hit, I was hanging on by my fingernails for a couple of years.
Yep.
It was probably one of the most scary times of my life. I hate it when I've got a particular employee that we had to let go because unfortunately it was a gross misconduct type issue. They were putting someone in dangers at work, but it still haunts me that I can't get him back and help him now because I really want to rescue him again, despite the fact I've rescued him 3 times already.
And just as a general piece of business advice, as we sort of get to the end of the conversation, is there any sort of general business advice you would give, not just people in SMEs, but say women in manufacturing and engineering that really would, set them up for the sort of journey you've had?
Be the very best you can be. Learn everything about the business, not just the role you're in. Because when you are a minority in a business, whether it's been female, young, old, whatever, people will naturally assume that you are not quite the whole package. And I think learn everything about every role within that business, even if it's getting your hands dirty going on the machines, which again, I think is a strength that I can empathise with every member of my team because I've done every one of their jobs.
Yep.
I think also be yourself. Be genuine, be empathetic, be emotional, be passionate. Because when people see that in you, they understand that they're allowed to be that way themselves, And I think finally, don't ever be afraid to try something completely different or say something that sounds completely stupid. Because bringing a different perspective, particularly for women in manufacturing, bringing that different perspective to the table, engineers are renowned for, we've always done it this way. It's one of their favourite sayings. We've always done it this way. We still see engineering drawings from the 1930s and 40s that have not been up-issued. Bringing that fresh perspective, even if it sounds really silly at the time, might just prompt somebody else to have that idea and go, well, actually, no, we can't put that guard there, but if we actually put a guard on this side, it might allow us to use that machine safely and be able to do that job. So, it's just stop. Don't be afraid, I think.
Andrea, look, thanks so much for your time. You're an absolute powerhouse. I wish I could plug into that energy most days. I think that if I'm not overreading it, I'm sure that your organisation feeds off that energy and that sort of direction you've got. So it's been amazing having a conversation with you. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank
you. For anyone out there that's on LinkedIn, follow Andrea. I think you've got a lot of good things to say and you're really shaking the tree for your industry, which is great. And, I wish you every success with that. And thanks again. Really enjoyed it. And I hope we cross paths again in the future. And maybe you can share some more positive outcomes about the sector if you get your way.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate that. Thank you.